To help me with today's discussion is the Managing Director of Occupational Management Limited, OML for short, a human resource organization. You're welcome. And she's in the person of Anita Wiafe-Asinor. You're welcome, Anita.
Thank you. Hello. Good afternoon to your listeners.
Afternoon. And now today there has been considerable interest in understanding the impact of human resource practices on business growth, or how businesses perform with human resource as part of their organization. And now, though human resource practices alone do not drive business growth, the influence it has had on businesses and sustaining it can also not be underrated.
Human resource is very, very key. It's key to every business. It doesn't matter what size the business. If you are employing people, you need to have HR function within that organization. So human resources, as it really sounds, is about the people element of your business. And that means if there's a people element, there has to be a department that manages that the people. So HR, as we usually abbreviate it, is that department. And the role that the HR plays is kind of, in fact, it's a double role. On the one hand, the HR is responsible for compliance. Okay, so that's number one, compliance, meaning that it has to ensure that the company operates and manages its people within the confinements of the law, which in our case will be the Ghana Labour Law 2003 Act 651 and the regulations that goes with it. Okay, so HR's first protocol is to make sure that the company is doing that. So that means things like making sure terms and conditions are okay, all right, in line with the law, all right. So things like working time, pay, holidays, and all of those things. So there's a compliance element, and then there's also a risk element. So that's also the responsibility of the HR. So that's things like health and safety, occupational health, fire, and all of those things. So that's a very important first protocol for HR. Then the second protocol is the people, because to be honest, if you don't have people working in GBC, we would not have programs going out on the air. So the second role of the HR is to make sure that the people that have been recruited into the company are able to bring the best for the company to achieve whatever the aims and objectives of that company is. So that means all aspects of the people management, from their welfare to their performance to their training to their development, is also part of the HR. And then the third role of the HR is to manage the relationship between the workers and the management, or let's say the employer, the leadership. And where you have a union, it would also be responsible for managing that relationship. So you can see just from that very brief summary, the role of HR is very key in an organization.
And are they included in the business strategy or organizational strategy in any way, as in how well the organization should fare? Are they considered?
Right. You see, now that's a big question. The issue is HR should be at the beginning of every conversation, meaning the HR manager, HR director, whatever the title is that is heading your human resource department. They should be at the beginning of the conversation. But actually, a lot of the time, they are at the end of the conversation. So meaning that the leadership will have discussions, come up with whatever they want to do, and then it's cascaded down the elements of the HR to the HR manager or director to implement. And that is problematic. It's problematic because sometimes, because they haven't been part of the conversation, they have not been given the opportunity to give the insights as to whatever is being decided, what the impact would be from the human factor. So if HR is allowed to play its role, where it is also around the table and is also at the beginning of the conversation, like the finance, the sales, the marketing manager or director, you're going to find that you probably end up having better results than HR being at the end of the conversation. But also, the effectiveness of an HR department is also as effective as the leader in that department. Are you with me? So if I'm the HR manager and I'm not fit for purpose, you're going to find that my function is not going to be fit for purpose. So that also plays a role.
But won't there be contradictions with maybe the leader feeling you want to dictate to him or her?
I think that is the key. We really play an advisory and support role, meaning that in my role, you have to give me the trust that I'm expert in my role to tell you that you want to do this, I have to first look at is what we want to do in line with the law, is what we want to do in line with good practice, and then advise. And if I advise, I will also tell you the risks of listening to me and the risks of not listening to me. And then it comes to leadership to take a decision. Of course, all the time, for me, for example, I'm going to try and ensure that we do the right thing. But at the end of the day, you do have people who are senior. You have boards, you have who can just decide we're not going to do this. In that instance, it's not really something a lot you can control. But what you can do is make sure that you cover yourself by maybe confirming in writing that, I advise this, but you've decided to do this, so that if something does go wrong, you are not now held accountable from people not listening to you.
Now, you kept mentioning ethics. Are there ethics or principles or standards that guide HR practice?
There is. Number one.
For Ghana?
For Ghana. Number
Okay.
one is our Labour Act. It tells us how we should be advising our business owners or companies across industry, across sector. That is our first guide. So if the law says everybody should be doing 40 hours a week and it gives you guidance on how you can vary that, but then you're encouraging people to be working 80, 70 hours and you're not even paying them overtime, are you following the ethics of the law? No. So there is a guide.
Yeah.
And then of course we also know that we have an institute and various other certifiable organizations who have set standards of how we should behave and how we should practice, which is really, we should not be doing anything that is going to compromise us or compromise the business. So we should always be trying to do the right thing as practitioners. So there is guides, there are standards, and if you don't know the others, the Labour Act is there. Every practicing HR person who knows what they're about should know that the Labour Act is where it stands for. It sets the standards of our practice anyway.
Yeah, like we have professional bodies where
Yes, you have, exactly.
Do
So
you
you have
have a professional body that gives certificates to HR practitioners in that when you misbehave or you go against the law, your certificate or license can be withdrawn? Do you have anything like that in the HR sector?
We don't have, in terms of licensing being withdrawn in Ghana, but there is an institute, the Institute of HR, who are supposed to be the body for certifying or where you go to be trained and get the qualifications in HR. And then there are also international bodies which are recognized because HR sits across sectors and industries and you can practice it all over the world. The standards, there are international standards. Of course, you'll always have your national, let's say your local standards as well. So really as a practitioner, you want to make sure you have both your local and your international standards, especially if you want to work outside of Ghana, let's say. So there are governing standards, and there are obviously governing rules, which, as I said, is our Labour Act, which tells us how and what we should be doing when it comes to managing the people in organizations.
Sure. Now, when it comes to HR, as you said right from the beginning, HR has to do with dealing with people.
Yes.
Basically, that's the main,
Yes.
the primary role of an HR person. You deal with people. There are instances where employees do complain, this HR doesn't like me. Like, how do the work of HR persons in organizations affect the performance of employees in an organization or entity?
Okay. So you remember I said the effectiveness of the HR is dependent on who is leading that particular department or team. And you do hear employees saying that. I mean, I've heard it number of times over the years. And this is where the situation, remember I said there's 3 roles. The third role was managing the relationship between the employees and the leadership. And that is where it's a bit of a challenge for many practitioners, where they are trying to manage the interest of the organization and the stakeholders, which is the workers, or if you have unions, the managers, the shareholders, etc. So what you tend to find that because this is a struggle, you find that many practitioners end up leaning a little bit too much towards the side of the management. But you also get instances where the practitioners also lean a little bit too much to the side of the workers. The issue is you should be trying to strike balance. Are you getting? Which means you always take decisions based on, is this the best thing for the organization? So that means if I take that approach, it means if the leadership is misbehaving, I should be able to let them know and pull them in. And if the workers are misbehaving, I should be able to act and bring them in, because I'm looking at what's best for the organization. But if I begin to look at what's best for stakeholders, that is where I'm pulled likely to one side. And usually you're likely to be pulled to the leadership side, because technically speaking, you are managing the interest of the company, and as a leadership who are enforcing that.
So you did mention that in the event you are supposed to, the HR person is supposed to be there right from the beginning to the end, and you are supposed to play an advisory role. And
so you should be able to advise the worker. So if the worker came and said, I want to do A, B, and C, I, as the HR man, should be able to say, well, I don't think that's the best, because the law says these are the rights of the worker. I should be able to advise the worker in as far as I'm able to advise the managers. But a lot of the time, it is not operating like that.
Yeah. So as I was saying, in the event where you've done all these things, and especially when it comes to management, and you have written, like you said, you have to put it in writing and put it somewhere, so when it does come up, everybody will get to know that you did advise them and they didn't take it. Aside from undertaking some of those steps to save yourself, if I should put it, what other measures can you implement to ensure that you are free?
I think what I want to add to that is that when I say you put to the management, this is the advisory, this is what I'm recommending, this is what will happen if we don't do this, or this will happen if we do this. You are backing it up with facts and figures, not emotion. The reality is, in the business world, contrary to how people may feel, people should care and do all this, people do. But it's a business environment. There's going to be an element of coldness in that, meaning that there is a business at hand. So you have to bring in facts and figures. So if I am going to, let's assume we are not paying our SNIT, all right? Let's assume we're not paying our SNIT, and you've hired me as your HR, and we're not paying our SNIT. Okay, we are not in line. We need to align. If I go and say to the manager, well, I think you should pay your SNIT, because you know what the cost, probably that, they probably already know this, all right? But then if I begin to do analysis to see what the impact would be, right, in our consistent failure to comply, in terms of the cost to the bottom line, in terms of even prosecution and all of those things, I'm able to give you a visual of the reality of what will happen. Are you getting me? You are probably going to listen to me more than kind of just coming down the reasons of is the right thing to do, because a lot of the time people know it's the right thing to do. Are you getting me? But because of whatever factors, they may not be doing it. So it will take, I always say it will take a leadership who have just decided we don't want to do the right thing, not to want to be supported and guided into compliance. So if I have started, maybe you didn't know, or whatever the history has been, I've come and I've been able to show you that we need to become compliant. Maybe we cannot do it all in one, but we have to progressively get there. It will be something to say you will not do it. And then in that case, I would have to advise myself, is this the kind of organization I want to work for?
I was just coming there. Are there instances where you would prefer to resign and maybe find your way, because sometimes it can be very tough?
As a consultant, there's been instances I have turned down work because you have to have some form of ethics and integrity. You never walk into a company and have everything right. You never walk into a company and there won't be some elements of issues or even breaches. But the issue is there has to be a will to want to progressively bring ourselves in line. And if that's not going to happen, it means one day when the problem hits, your name, sometimes you hear it, right? And you are media. Issues happen and you start hearing companies' name being mentioned and whatnot. And when that is mentioned, there's always, or automatically there's a negative thinking said they've probably been encouraging or supporting the leadership to do what they are doing. And probably you should go into, you realize they probably weren't. So for me to go down that route, then no, I will abstain.
Sure, she will never go, unless maybe she would have to forget going with the work, or maybe resign.
Yeah, I think at a point, as a practitioner, you've got to decide what kind of practitioner you want to be, and what you will do and what you will not do, and how far. And I think it comes with as you grow and with experience. And I think I've been doing this a long time, so it gets to a point where you kind of know what.
The topic for discussion as we have here, is the impact of human resource practices on business growth, or how organizations or businesses perform when they have that human resource factor as part of their organization. And as I stated earlier, my guest has been Anita Wiafe-Asinor with us, the managing director of OML Africa, a human resource organization. Now, Anita, are there specific, I think you did mention that indeed there are some standards that one would have to adhere to if you want to be a professional HR practitioner. Now, in terms of business strategies, what would you suggest is the utmost priority for a business? Is it a company's culture or the implementation of the best HR practices? Because there are some organizations who hold certain values and certain things so dear that it becomes part of the organization. That is organization, we don't do A, we don't do B. But as a HR practitioner, it doesn't fall in line. In that instance, where do you fit yourself?
Okay, so the priorities of a business will vary depending on what the business is and what they're trying to achieve. For me, once the business knows what it wants to achieve, where it's going, which usually sits in its vision, its values, and what the business actually does, the next priority should be alignment. That is aligning your people to what your strategy, to whatever you're trying to achieve. Alignment is important because if you've hired me, all right, and so for example, GBC has hired you, but you don't know that GBC's aim is to become, to stay ahead, to become, to be the leading broadcasting. And therefore, it means that for that to happen, it needs to make sure all his reporters, all his presenters, all his hosts, everybody must understand that this is what GBC wants to achieve. Are you getting me? So that when we're doing our work, we always have in the back of our mind is because we're trying to get to this vision, this position in the market that GBC wants to get to. So alignment is very important. So a lot of the time, if strategies are not good, sometimes it's due to alignment. All right.
Yeah.
And then of course the next thing is being able to cascade down what is important in the culture. Cultures form. And a lot of it is led by the leadership.
Sure.
And then also our failures to maybe manage things as they are happening. So culture is something where it is kind of a combination of what we're trying to achieve and how we go about doing it. All right. And that one you are always trying to manage. But so you hear a lot of companies say we want a performance culture. If you want to create a performance culture, it means you have to be deliberate. Okay, you have to reward those who perform, you have to deal with those who don't, you have to create an enabling environment for people to perform. So the culture you want to develop will really depend on where you're trying to go and the kinds of people who are involved in the business. But then if you come to the HR element, for me, once we know about the business and some of these quick pointers I've given, I feel the other important thing once we've recruited the people in is engagement. We need to engage because now people will say no, it's performance, but no, I now looking at the way HR is now, how we've grown. We're talking modern HR now across the world. Engagement is important because if I engage you, then my performance, appraisals, targets, KPIs, whatever is going to work because you engage. Engage means you want to be here, you want to be part, you want to help me to get there, you want to stay here, you're happy to be here. You're not just turning up so that I'll pay you at the end of the month. You're turning up because you enjoy your job. I'm training you, I'm developing you, I'm pushing you. I'm engaged. So now I can manage your performance and get the best out of you and get the outcome.
I was just coming to that. Immediately mentioned performance. I was so excited because there's this thing that as you keep training, there is this saying that if you don't keep training or if you don't keep learning, you rust. Yes.
You become archaic.
Sure. So how often are HR practitioners supposed to kind of organize some of these things for their staff? Because there are people who don't necessarily invest in these things. Others do invest in people, and you'll be there and you'll end up poaching others. Meanwhile, they have the capacity. They have people who, when they are trained or given the necessary know-how, they'll be able to perform better than maybe those they decide to go out for.
Exactly. I think I have to bring this one to Ghana. I think it's something that is sitting in our corporate culture, in the world of work, where there are some who are doing a very good job in investing in their people, but there's a lot of companies who feel I'm going to train A and then A is going to leave. All right. Yeah. So there is this reluctancy not to train, or there is not enough training going on. Let me put it that way. Yeah. Meanwhile, in our Labour Act, it says the employer has to train and develop.
So how often should that be?
The frequency of the training will be dependent on the need of the individual. All right, but you do need to train. In fact, I know that one of the factors of the millennials in all the research that I've looked at, including research in Africa, is development and being used to their fullest potential, meaning millennials, meaning the young generation that are entering the workforce. So you find that some people are leaving places because they're like, there's no progression, there's no training, I'm not being challenged. All right. So training and development, no more than it is become is a key factor now to retention. Sure. Yeah. So I am saying to companies who feel like, oh, well, it's just the factory hand, cheap labor, I can keep getting. Well, yeah, because the HR is not doing the analytics, let you know how long it takes you for each time you hand, let's say, I'm using the factory hand as an example, but each time you hire that factory hand, how long it takes for that person to perform, all right, versus you trying to do a little bit of training and engagement to keep that person. So if let's say
launch. Now, Anita, what is this HR support system about?
Okay, so obviously, OML, we're working with companies across sectors and industries, and one of the group of companies is around let's say the SMEs. Okay. And over the years, we've realized that a lot of the issues, one of the key issues, in addition to some that we know, is the people element of SMEs. So, meaning the human resource element. Okay. A lot of SMEs have a lot of people issues. So, by SMEs, we're talking about the small, medium enterprises. And so, we've launched this service, HR support, we're calling it Deliver My HR, where we're trying to advocate and push for SMEs to at least those who don't have any HR support, or those who have little, or they have even assigned it to maybe the receptionist or the finance, because usually that means we're not really seeing the value of the HR, but we feel there has to be somebody who oversees recruitment or who sees who's coming in, but we're not really giving the HR the presence it needs. And so it's attached to some. So we're targeting those SMEs who are like that, to say them at least buy in minimum support, because I have to tell you that we need the SMEs to work. Because contrary to the belief of people that government is going to employ everybody, it is not so. It is never going to happen. Sure. It's the SMEs that have to grow. Yeah. They have to grow well. And the way for them to grow is to have proper people insights, knowing how to make sure they are using their people well to get the results they want. All right.
Them operates.
Mm-hmm. So really, what happens is, for example, some of the companies that have been coming on, we had an instance, one of our new clients, where one of our clients that came on the early stages, where they didn't even have one record of their employee. So they could have come in one day and the employees have run off with their laptop. They would not even know where they were going to begin to trace them. Wow. But they hadn't even thought. It's because, are you getting me? It's like, well, they come, they've got a very nice relationship with their work. They're not even thinking about risk.
Sure.
All right.
And that's a huge risk.
That's a huge risk. That's a very huge risk. So the idea of this service is saying at least you should have some minimum support. And we also felt like we don't want financial barriers to be the case. So our service actually starts from, you can just have 1.5 days a week support every week for a month, which is like 6 days in a month. But what is important with us is that when we come in, we're not now coming to learn how to do HR. We know how to do HR. We're coming in to look at where you are and how we're going to strengthen you. So you find out what we've seen is that some companies have brought us in to literally set up the HR, get it moving, and they're like, Anita, can you just find us the right person to take over and run? Others, they're like, no, we want you to do it. It's up to you. You know what you need once you engage. But what we are saying is you should have good professional HR support if you're an SME. Stop thinking that the people element isn't key. It is.